So I want to start off by saying that for the first episode in this series of rant videos, I'm a little annoyed that I'm having to bitch about this game again. Despite the impression that my previous videos give off, I generally like to be positive about Yu-Gi-Oh, given how fucking negative the community tends to be. But with all these issues that have been cropping up, I can't keep pretending that they'll just go away on their own. For those who haven't been playing the game or keeping up with the recent formats, Yu-Gi-Oh has been in a really weird position for the last 2 years. On the OCG side of things, the Japanese player base has been spoiled beyond belief. They have set releases with fair pull rates and accessible printings of competitive cards, as well as they often receive plenty of structure decks and other sorts of products. Their metagame is still in a somewhat slanted format from what I understand, but I'm not really informed enough to give an opinion on it. But as far as the TCG goes, where the fuck do I even begin? We've had numerous cases of card shops deciding to no longer carry Yu-Gi-Oh products, there's been an on and off discussion regarding time rules in this game, and the price of entry for competitive Yu-Gi-Oh has completely skyrocketed since the release of SB Little Knight. There's been a lot of complaints lately about Yu-Gi-Oh's poor tournament pricing compared to other card games, there's still a lot of problematic cards running around the format, and now there's the matter of Konami's recent ban on custom mats and card sleeves at larger events. And to top it all off, we've had 3 incredibly oppressive formats since fall of 2022, consisting of a Shizu tier limit, Kashtira, and now Snake Eye. Suffice it to say, people are tired of constant power creep. So with the nearby release of the Fiendsmith cards, which are anticipated to make the Tier 0 deck Snake Eye even more oppressive than it already is, Yu-Gi-Oh has reached a breaking point. The game is currently unwelcoming to newcomers, mandatory competitive staples for this format are highly inaccessible for those playing on a budget, the product releases have been severely hit or miss, the top deck in the room is incredibly unfun and difficult to play against, and overall, a lot of players are sick of how Konami has been treating the TCG and its community as a whole. What's more, Konami appears to have no intentions of doing anything about these issues. With the announcement of Snake Eye Ash being confirmed as an ulti in the next OTS pack, it gives me the impression that Konami just hasn't been reading the room whatsoever. Either that, or Konami has no idea how the fuck to rein in this deck without outright killing it and wasting thousands of people's poorly made investments. And that's just regarding the Snake Eye issue. There's still all the other problems that I listed previously, and all of those are the fault of Konami's poor decisions. So that begs the question, how the fuck does Konami get itself out of this situation? Konami has really dug themselves into a hole with all these compounding issues, and unless they address pretty much all of them, I think this game's problems will only get much worse and will cause more players and vendors to distance themselves from the game, which will in turn cause Konami to double down on these awful decisions in order to maintain profits in the short term. It's just a vicious cycle and it needs to be addressed before we reach the point of no return. So in this video, I wanted to share some actions that I think can be done in order to stop the bleeding. We'll be going over these problems in order of importance, starting with the obvious.
Enough is enough! I have had it with these motherfucking snakes on this motherfucking...
Snake Eye and its consequences have been a disaster for the Yu-Gi-Oh meta. If you know, you know. But for those of you who don't, I want you to picture in your head an archetype where basically every card is a 1-card starter that ends on a fuck ton of negates and disruption. And to top it all off, it's also a mid-range deck with a lot of gas, and it can main deck a lot of non-engine. That's what we're dealing with. Konami has somehow made a deck with a game plan more boring than Sky Striker. While I can't speak much on Snake Eye's performance in Master Duel since I don't really play it that much, what I can say regarding the TCG is that people have been either quitting or going on hiatus because of this Tier 0 menace. Overall, Snake Eye is just an unfathomably oppressive strategy, and the deck has greatly exacerbated this game's going first problem to an insane degree. The issue, though, is that the deck is still relatively new and people have spent an absurd amount of money to compete with this deck at the top level. Around its peak in price, the Snake Eye deck was worth over $1,000. So I can sort of see Konami's dilemma here. Even if they wanted to hit the deck, how the fuck do they go about it without pissing off the people who shelled out hundreds of dollars? My advice in this situation is that anyone who still has this deck needs to offload it while they can, because they need to come to terms with the fact that this deck has to be hit hard. With how the Snake Eye deck is designed, even limiting 3 or 4 cards won't solve the problem without banning something, because Pot of Prosperity is still legal, and there's other engines that can also fill in consistency gaps, such as the Super Heavy Samurai package. So originally I was going to go over some sample decks I made to test different potential bans and limits, but I shared my findings with my boy Evan, and he more or less has this situation already figured out. I've admittedly been busy with life and with other projects, so he's been following the Tier 0 meta a lot more closely than I have. Evan's suggestion was that if we're going to ban Oak, then we should also limit Bonfire and Wanted to hit consistency. Wanted is a limit suggestion that's been kind of memed to death, but Bonfire at 1 is a suggestion that people are probably going to be split on. A lot of the arguments I've seen in the comment sections of videos is that Bonfire doesn't need to be limited since it's a hard once per turn. The problem, though, is that regardless of whether or not it's a once per turn, you're realistically only ever going to have one in hand most of the time, maybe two. Considering all the starters in Snake Eye are designed to also funnel into the same Link combo, running virtually as many starters as possible is what has allowed this deck to see such massive success. There's also the fact as well that pretty much any deck after we address the Tier 0 menace will still be able to get a free summon off of Poplar if 3 Bonfires are still legal in the format. Because it doesn't cost anything to summon Poplar from adding it to hand. So just for the sake of the meta and its health, I do think that limiting the card is warranted. There are a few points of criticism I want to address briefly. But ultimately, I do think Evan's suggestion was a lot better than what I was able to come up with. My hope really is that the Yu-Gi-Oh community can come together after this video and further workshop this idea to make sure whether it would be enough to rein in the deck. With that out of the way, here are my points of criticism. For starters, I am concerned that the consistency gaps could be filled in with Pot of Prosperity. For the first time since I've started playing this game in 2021, I genuinely think Snake Eye warrants limiting or banning this card to ensure that other decks can still play the game. With the release of Molchummy Perulia in the near future, it's not like we aren't going to receive more tools for going second. We can probably justify putting this card on the list finally without damaging other decks. Secondly, there's the matter of the deck's power ceiling. Especially with the upcoming release of the Fiendsmith cards, this deck, much like many others running around with this package, will still be able to throw bodies on the board like it's nobody's business. This isn't to say we won't adjust our tech cards accordingly to account for this package, but overall the Fiendsmith cards still provide a lot of bodies at the cost of 0 normal summons. So if we're going to go this route and hit these cards specifically to reduce the deck's consistency and grind game, then I think this still warrants also banning one or more boss monsters from the extra deck, which I'll address in a minute. Again, I do want to thank Evan for his contributions to this section of the video. I wanted to get this out in a timely manner, and I just didn't have the time lately to properly lab out a solution myself. Okay, so that takes care of the first big problem. With Snake Eye out of the way, the next big issue that would need to be addressed is hitting problem cards in the format outside of Snake Eye. This one is more of a no-brainer since the community has discussed this sort of thing ad nauseum. Preferably on the same ban list as the direct hits of Snake Eye, Konami should ideally ban the following cards: Dimension Shifter, Albion the Sanctifier Dragon, IP Masquerena, and either Crimson Dragon or Calamity. While I understand that Appaloosa has been a pain in the ass, I think the big problem that is enabling this card in Snake Eye is the fact that you can go into her on the opponent's turn through IP Masquerena using Flamberge after having exhausted other resources. However, if you still think that wouldn't be enough to hinder Appaloosa, then by all means I'm all for banning the card as opposed to IP. Beyond these 4 hits, there are some other cards I would like to see banned just to clean up the format a bit. For starters, I would personally like to see Dissipator banned just so that Snake Eye can't possibly abuse Psyframe Lord Omega again. Seriously, I cannot stress enough how painful it was watching those guys rip 2 cards out of the opponent's hand before they've even had a chance to play. The combo is effectively just Delinquent Duo, and I fucking hated watching it on stream. On top of that, there's obviously some floodgates that still need to be banned and limited. Personally, I'm not of the belief that we need to ban every floodgate in Yu-Gi-Oh! But going forward, I do think that Konami needs to design future floodgates with built-in counterplay. A really good example of a card like this is something like Performapal 5 Rainbow Magician, which is a Mystic Mine that gives you the ability to turn off its floodgate at the cost of having to keep a spell or trap face down on your field. I think that if we had more floodgates with this sort of design ethos, it could make stun decks just a little bit more interesting to play against. But yeah, this is what I think should be on the next list. Everything else on this chart that I haven't mentioned specifically is either a consistency check to popular staples and tech cards in the format, or a hit to some other popular deck in the room. And then here's what I would personally want in addition to that. If you think I'm wrong, then go cry about it, I guess. Grass is a funny card, and Dryden did nothing wrong. The next topic that needs to be addressed is pricing. I'm not going to cover time rules in this video because for my own sanity, I really don't want to listen to a bunch of Redditors tell me again that I'm bad at the game or some shit. Not to mention that fixing time rules would probably require an entire video of its own. Prizing is just easier to tackle in terms of the scope of this episode. For those who haven't seen the Kali Effects video on this topic, I would recommend checking it out. He does an excellent job of breaking down what other TCGs are currently doing in the way of prizing, and frankly, it makes Yu-Gi-Oh! Look embarrassing by comparison. In terms of what ideas I have personally, this is the sort of structure I've set up. I do want to note that I tried to still be conservative with these suggestions since it is Konami we're talking about, as well as I tried to keep it in line with Konami's current prize structuring. First off, I believe that simply participating at a YCS should reward you with cool prizes. While a promo card as a participation reward wouldn't really be worth much if a lot of people attend the event, it would still be cool to have and would probably still be worth a few dozen bucks. As for the oversleeves, I figure that if Konami is going to be stingy about what sleeves and mats you can take to events, they should at least provide players with more accessories. The rewards for making it to Top Cut are more or less what Kali suggested in his video. I would highly suggest that Konami make a new plush at the start of every tournament season if they're going to go this route so that plushies from previous years can still accrue value. For example, if the plushie for 2025 is a Blue Eyes White Dragon, then you can make the 2026 plushie a Dark Magician or something. And then in 2027 it could be a Karibo, and then so on and so forth. And if Konami decides to revisit previous monsters for future plushies, they should at least still be brand new designs. After all, the whole point of this is so that people have their own unique prize for having attended that event. This is where my suggestions begin to deviate from the Kali video. On top of the previous rewards, players who make it into top 16 should receive a Secret Pharaoh's Rare promo of a valuable card from the latest set. The reason I went with Secret Pharaoh's Rare is because it's a criminally underutilized rarity. It would set the Top Cut promos apart from other rarities used in commercial products, and it would have a lot of resale value on the secondary market. Not only does this help solve the problem of prizes at Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournaments being worthless, but it also strengthens the game's collector's market. Those who make it to top 8 should receive everything mentioned previously, along with a Nintendo Switch, a download code for an event-exclusive reward in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, and a different card from the latest set printed in Secret Pharaoh's Rare. What really baffles me when it comes to Konami giving out Nintendo Switches is that they could be using it to push their brand and products. Ultimately, the changes I'm suggesting are designed to not only increase the value of prizes, but also reinforce the Yu-Gi-Oh! Brand as a whole. The rewards for making it to top 4 should be everything mentioned previously, as well as an uncut card sheet of the latest set, and yet another different card printed in Secret Pharaoh's Rare. Again, the goal really is to shower your top players with a lot of different rewards, because it incentivizes them to buy more of your product and to put more time into getting better at the game. It also incentivizes other players to try and compete for their spot. These competitive players are basically free advertisers for your game, Konami, and you should be utilizing them to the fullest extent. The runner-up of your event should receive everything mentioned previously, of course, as well as another Secret Pharaoh's Rare promo. You could still give them the messenger bag if you want, but aside from the bag and promo card, my suggestion for the top 2 players is that they each receive a Seto Kaiba coat. Aside from the fact that it would be easy to produce since you'd only have to make, 2 coats in every size to account for who your 2 final duelists are, they would also be worth a fortune since it would be valuable to collectors. Granted, I think the prize for top 2 could really be anything at this point, since all the other rewards for making it this far are already thoroughly covered. I just think that having a coat to cosplay in would be cool. Finally, the winner of your event should receive everything mentioned previously, plus the acrylic trophy that they currently get. But on top of that, they should also receive an Ultimate Rare promo of a signed alternate art of an iconic Yu-Gi-Oh! Card. For example, let's say the card was of Blue Eyes White Dragon. On top of it having a brand new artwork made specifically for the event, it would also be signed by Eric Stewart, the voice of Seto Kaiba. Since it would be both one of a kind and signed by a celebrity, the value of it pretty much speaks for itself. All in all, it's really not that hard to increase the worth of Yu-Gi-Oh's prizing after you break it down like this. You just have to be willing to put in the effort. So that should help fix the issue with prizing. Next on the docket is card pricings. Okay, I'm probably going to sound like I'm just parroting other people, but seriously, Konami, just bring back the OCG rarity distributions. Or if you aren't going to do that, then at the very least, you should be giving us other products that help make the game more accessible, such as the tactical tri-decks. It also wouldn't hurt if Konami would officially support popular Time Wizard formats. This is something that Monkey Fight TCG brought up in his video in the State of Yu-Gi-Oh! And while I didn't agree with everything he had to say, he was absolutely right about this issue. Aside from the fact that it provides people more ways to enjoy your product, as well as it provides newcomers a means to slowly acclimate themselves to the modern game, it it would also just be a nice thing to do for the community. As much as I enjoy ordering singles online and tearing open packs, it would definitely be more convenient for newcomers if they could just buy a standalone product at Walmart or something. Like, you have all these resources, Konami, and you're wasting it on awful shit like the 2-player starter deck, which I've already griped about enough on this channel. And while we're on the topic of card prices, this brings me to my next suggestion. Konami, you need to be doing more with your intellectual property. Aside from the fact that this game's collector's market is abysmal compared to Pokemon, which I want to touch on in a future video about alternate arts, there's also the fact that you have literally hundreds of archetypes with their own characters and stories. Would it kill you to take a few more risks with the Yu-Gi-Oh brand? I'm not talking about making Cross Duel 2 or a Yu-Gi-Oh VR card game. I mean something along the lines of this. Like, you're literally sitting on a gold mine and could easily compete with the Pokemon company in terms of video games or anime or whatever. But you just aren't doing that for whatever reason. I get that Rush Duel probably takes up a lot of your resources, but I'm telling you now, if you made a Yu-Gi-Oh fighting game, or a Konosuba type anime that took place in the Labyrinth lore, or even just a turn-based strategy game set in either the Albaz or Dual Terminal lore akin to Fire Emblem, people would eat that shit up. And to Konami's credit, they have been flirting with the idea lately. Overall, I think the big takeaway from this is that the additional revenue from both a strong collector's market and other supplemental media would certainly help to bring down the price of cards in the competitive scene. Because then at that point, the competitive scene doesn't become their main revenue source. Finally, there's the whole playmat and card sleeves issue. I mean, just allow people to bring their custom mats. I can sort of understand placing restrictions on card sleeves since they still show up during early feature matches, but feature matches already play at a table with its own double-sided mat. The issue with mats during YCS streams is basically non-existent, and strict policy is just going to piss people off. So yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to yap about in this video. I think Konami should hire me to fix their game, and I think that the people who spent $1,000 on a single deck are part of the problem. If you have any further ideas on how Konami could fix all these problems, then feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.